Halloween has been my least favorite holiday ever since I graduated college and got my place. I hated the idea of strangers coming up to my house with their kids and asking for candy all day, but I dealt with it with a smile on my face. My property is big, but it doesn't have any fences. Times in the past I'd seen kids fight each other with silly string in my yard. Hell, I've even had kids TP in silly string in my house. One year though, late at night, past the hours when the bulk of trick-or-treaters were out, I got another ring from the doorbell and my dog Tamika started going crazy, barking as she had been doing all day. I opened the door to a person in a full-body gorilla costume. Only the face of the gorilla was freaky looking. It was a costume made to look scary. He didn't say trick or treat. He just held up a small plastic bag that was filled with some candies. Not a lot. Since it was close to the end of the night and I had a lot of candy left, I dumped a lot of it into his bag and waved goodbye. He didn't speak any words to me though, as he just stood on my stoop, slowly going through the bag, looking at the candies I just gave him. As I shut the door halfway, I stopped and continued to watch him as he looked up at me but didn't say anything. I asked if he wanted more, but he didn't shake his head or respond or anything. He kept looking at me weirdly, so I just shut the door and locked it. I wasn't in the mood to be playing games. Plus, what he was doing was extremely unsettling. I went back downstairs to my den to continue watching the movie that I had on. That's when I heard something fall outside. The back door was right next to my couch, so I got back up and took like 5 steps to look outside. With the back patio light on, I could see a rake that had been leaning on a pole had fallen. Given how I left it sitting, it was weird for it to have fallen on its own. Being Halloween, I did feel the need to go out and investigate. I threw on my slides and went outside to pick up the rake first of all. It was not windy out at all, so it shouldn't have fallen on its own. Then I noticed the door to my shed was cracked open. I have a huge shed in my backyard that I store all of my outdoor equipment in. I went over to take a look inside. As big as the shed is, the lights haven't worked in there for years, so I had to use the light from my phone screen at full brightness as a flashlight of sorts. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I certainly wasn't expecting to find a gorilla mask sitting on a big box. I knew right away. The light from the phone screen only traveled so far, but I still dared walk further into the shed until I saw him in the corner. There was a person in a gorilla suit, only now he had his mask off. I stepped a little closer and realized he was facing the wall, just standing motionless. He was also not a kid, but rather some old, terrifying-looking man. I didn't know if you heard or saw me yet, so I started backing away slowly. But even though I didn't make a sound, his head suddenly turned to face me. It nearly made me shit myself or have a heart attack. I ran back outside and slammed the shed door shut behind me. I then ran back to my back house door and heard the door to the shed open with a lot of force. I didn't look back. I just went inside and locked the door. Then of course I called the police to report a trespasser on my property. It figures. However, by the time the cops arrived, the guy in the gorilla suit was gone, mask and all. All they could do was assure me they'd be on the lookout for someone in a gorilla suit. Then they went on their way. After that, I didn't have much interest in finishing the movie, so we went upstairs and called it a night. That night in bed, I did wake up to Tamika barking downstairs though, so I left my room to see where she was. She was in the den by the back door, barking ferociously. I took a quick look outside without letting Tamika out with me, but I didn't see anyone, and the shed door was still shut. Still, I felt creeped out being out in that yard that night, so I hurried back in and brought Tamika off to sleep in my room with me. I fell asleep, not without hearing Tamika growling slightly occasionally, which freaked me out a lot. The next morning, and ever since, life has been completely normal, and that was by far the scariest Halloween I've ever had. It was Halloween 2012, my senior year of high school. I went to a Catholic school, so we always had the day off after Halloween because it was considered a church holy day. So my friends were game to start our weekend early. On nights when we didn't go to parties, we usually do the same thing. We sit on my front steps for a couple of hours and joke around. Then we will walk the neighborhood and usually end up at this shitty pizza place across town because the prices were so cheap. Since few of us had recently broken up with our girlfriends, we weren't in much of a party mood, so we did our usual. It's around 10:30 at night and the pizza joint is closing up for the night. There were 3 of us, me, my friend Pat, and Jack. We finished our food, refilled our drinks, and headed out. To get back to my house, we had to cross this large mall parking lot that's about 4 football fields long and 2 wide. I should mention at this point that we aren't dumb or naive kids. We all have grown up in the city and had our fair share of urban experiences. All 3 of us were pretty streetwise and were confident on the street by ourselves. But we experienced something tonight that we were totally unprepared for. So we're walking through the parking lot and it's absolutely desolate, not a soul in sight. Suddenly we see a white tradesman van creeping slowly behind us, about 100 yards back. I pointed out to my friends and we picked up our pace. We popped collars on our jackets and we hunched our shoulders out to make us seem a lot bigger than what we were. In an instant, the van speeds up and cuts off our path. Everything in the van is pitch black, so we can't see anyone in there. That's when someone calls out in the non-threatening voice, "Hey man, happy Halloween! You guys like Halloween?" Despite the jovial manner in which this was said, a van doesn't cut you off in the parking lot unless it has bad intentions. We had nowhere to go. We could run, but they're in a van that would catch up easily, and we'd have to turn our backs to them. He says it again. "Hey man, you guys like Halloween?" I respond, trying to sound tough. "Yeah, but it's over now, all right? So we're heading home and you're on our way." No, dude, it ain't over. We still got some candy in here," he replied. The tone suddenly shifted, and still, we couldn't see anyone in the van. 3 of us puff our chests out. Get ready for a fight. After a brief silence that felt like it dragged on for hours, Jack cuts the tension by sternly saying, "Listen up, man. I don't know what you think you're about to do, but if you don't leave, it's going to be a problem." Once he said that, the back door of the van swung open and 2 very tall men stepped out. They had black suits on with black leather gloves and were well built and strong looking. But the most menacing thing was that they were both wearing these cheap Mitt Romney masks. That's when we realized this wasn't a Halloween prank. At that moment, all 3 of us went to take off. But the van started driving circles around us. We had no idea how we were going to get out of this situation. I have no idea what these guys were planning to do with 3 18-year-old men. But they seemed like they knew what they were doing, and we were all getting ready for the fight of our lives. The van stopped. It looked like they were about to make a move. This was it. I mentioned that there were 3 of us that night. It was at this moment that our friend Pats, the one who had stayed silent up to this point, leaned into the both of us and quietly said, "Hey, this is a Hail Mary, but get ready to fucking run when I say go, all right?" He then picked up one of our sodas, which was in the cup, and threw with all his might at the driver's side window. The window was open, and the cup miraculously connected with the driver's head. Pat screamed, "Run!" We all took off across the parking lot. The van swerved off in the other direction, and we hurried our scared asses home. Jack and I were both confused as to why a simple cup of soda got them to give up their plans. Then we found out what actually happened. While we were panicking, Pat kept his cool. He nonchalantly dumped out the drink that was in his hand and slipped a big-ass rock into the cup. Then he waited for the right moment. The driver, thinking that this kid just threw a drink at him, wound up getting pegged in the head with a rock. It probably knocked him out cold, or at least brought us enough time to put some distance between us. All that was left after that was pulling off a miracle and getting the rock to hit the right place. Maybe a guardian angel or God himself took care of that. I'm still amazed by it. I was 22 years old, attending a Halloween party at my former best friend Nick's house, who died of a heroin overdose in 2013. Before his death, he would throw a big Halloween party every year at his house, as his parents routinely flew to New York every year to attend their own friends' parties. He was always a big Halloween freak, so the whole house was littered with truly horrifying prompts that we all knew Nick spent way too much money on. He even put up giant walls of cardboard and covered them with wallpapers to create a haunted maze of some sort. This party was one of those with crazy teenagers. All it meant was that we weren't in our right minds. None of us were. Anyone who came to Nick's parties knew what went down. Me, Nick, and a few other guys, Vinny G, Joey, and Q, were upstairs in Nick's room smoking a bong when we heard 2 steady, loud bangs come from downstairs. Nick, clumsily but panicking, rushed to open the door and see what was going on. There were sounds of screaming from both guys and girls. I remember quite clearly. It sounded as if there were a crowd of people screaming for their lives down there. We all called Nick to come back in and shut the door. Even under the influence of drugs, We all knew what was going on. Nick ran back inside and shut the door quickly, but also quietly locked it behind him. He turned to us and had on the facial expression of someone who had just witnessed a murder. "What did you see? What's going on?" We all shouted at him. He told us to hide before anything else. We all knew why. From that point on, we didn't ask questions. Nick hit the lights and hid in the closet with Joey, while I hid under the bed with Q and Vinny G in the storage box. We could hear the blasting music from downstairs turn off, followed by a grown man screaming at everyone to shut up. One unfortunate girl let out a scream of shock and fear, and after another bang, silence. The man started shouting at everyone again, but personally, I couldn't hear it too well, and I certainly as hell wouldn't remember exactly what he was shouting. We heard 2 other men shouting. By now there were confirmed 3 intruders in the house, but there could have been more for all we knew at that point. We heard the sound of boots stomping up the stairs, and then coming halfway down the hall and stopping outside the bedroom door. The intruder on the other side of the door tried the doorknob, but when he realized it was locked, he started ramming into the door with most likely his shoulder. After a few failed attempts at that, the sound of a few shots to the doorknob was clearly enough to break the lock, allowing the door to swing open. We heard cries from downstairs after the shots to the doorknob, followed by a silencing gunshot. Me and Nick had our hands on our mouths to shield our breathing noises. I watched through the transparent cloth that hung from the bottom of Nick's bed as the black boots with overlapping ripping denim jeans moved instinctively to the closet. He opened the door. I could hear Nick begging the intruder not to kill him, offering a generous amount of money if they would leave. Nick gave himself up as the house owner. That's when the intruder ordered him downstairs. The rest of us stayed put. Apparently Joey hadn't been caught with Nick. We stayed under the bed, shaking and afraid. There was near silence from downstairs other than Nick talking with the intruders. But whatever they were saying was much too low for us to hear. It felt like nearly 20 minutes before the front door slammed shut, and Nick came running back upstairs to tell us that they were gone. I think the most horrifying moment of my life was when I stepped downstairs, back into the living room, and saw the 2 dead bodies lying lifelessly on the ground, holes in their heads spewing out blood, Jen and Robbie. 2 good friends that I still miss. When the police arrived, despite the fact that the house smelled like marijuana greenhouse, the police were more interested in finding out who the masked men were who killed 2 innocent college students. Oh yeah, Nick told the 4 of us who were hiding in his room that there were 4 intruders in total, all wearing fedoras, vendetta masks, coats, and gloves. They demanded $100,000 in cash, and when Nick could not provide it, they demanded he fill their empty sack with his most valued possessions. All the partygoers held hostage in the room were also forced to throw their wallets into the sack, or they would be shot. After the incident, Nick became depressed. He started drinking too much, becoming an alcoholic. He stopped showing up to school, ultimately ending up dropping out. He started the use of heavier drugs such as meth and heroin. I had one good talk with him since the incident, and he was more real during this talk than he had ever been. He told me with tears rolling down his cheeks and a pipe in his hand. He lived in constant pain, knowing he caused the death of 2 of his best friends. Nick died of a heroin overdose in July of 2013, not even a year after the incident.